Well, hey all, and welcome back. I just got back from TFCON. It was a 5-hour drive all the way back to St. Louis, but I'm ready to jump straight into a review for you all so you can check out the Master Builder God Delta from the Chosen Prime and Fans Hobby. This was a TFCON exclusive that they brought you, and this is my first Power Baser and Fans Hobby figure. So in this review, I'm going to cover the basic aesthetic of the figure, the different modes and configurations, all the different options, as well as compare it to a handful of other figures. So let's first check out the package. We have the name of the figure. We've got this nice illustration on here. We have a power driver and 3 junior drivers included. And look at that, it's actual size. Turn the package to the side. We have another nice illustration. And then here we have of the Magna bomber. And lastly, on the back, we have their socials, company information. Artwork is done by Get Right Robot. We also see all the different modes. Lastly, we have a very cool illustration of the main face for the final mode. So anyway, let's get this out of the package and see if it's worthy of our collection. And here's everything more or less how it comes out of the packaging. Everything is very well packed, lots of little baggies within baggies. It is impressive of how they did it. It was actually very satisfying to remove all the plastic that was wrapped around all the vehicle modes and weapons and stuff like that. They did such a good job. But we do have a manual here, which comes with a card. We've got our cannons, other missiles for those cannons, hand cannons. We have our engine mode, which I've not taken out yet because I don't want to lose these little eyes. So we have these additional yellow eyes. We have a yelling face for our new combined mode. This is something I wasn't even aware of. There are 3 junior headmasters that are included that are, I assume, compatible with their other headmaster sets coming out. We've got some missiles, another large cannon, 2 swords, and the God Bomber. And now the very first thing I'd like to talk about is the engine. We have this nice chrome here. We have some black accents on yellow plastic. And it is very bright, but it's very neat looking. We flip it over to the side, we actually see a fully painted chest and head. And what I want to compare this to is the original G1 PowerMaster Optimus engine. As you can see, there's some similarities in design. Flip it over, of course there's different colors, but you can see the similarities even in the way that it transforms. And when transformed, it is actually a fairly posable figure. We have elbows, shoulders, hips, some rotation there, the knees. I don't believe there's any kind of foot movement though it does have a slant in it so you can have a wide stance. So it is a pretty good looking robot mode. And which is not much smaller is the original one, which had no posability, but I just want to show you that in comparison. And then lastly, I actually want to bring in a Fans Project Diaclone inspired figure just to show you guys scale as well as stylization of a very similar looking design. Also yellow cues with some silver and gray highlights and black, but you can see that this guy actually looks a little bit better proportioned versus this one, even though I do enjoy this one quite a bit. So we'll set this aside, and mind you, it is a bit back heavy. And then we can get a closer look at these junior headmasters. So we have 3 here. Show you the faces of each one. And I can't say that I'm familiar with these characters very well, but the designs are nice looking. And here we have the figures transformed. One note about their transformation is they are actually kind of parts formers, maybe to get more anime accurate, but the foreheads on each of them pop off. But there is storage on the vehicle mode for that. So if you want to have them that way. But we do have some shoulder articulation, bend at the elbows, a little bit at the head. There is a hip crunch, but that's part of the transformation. And of course we have hips, and knees, and slightly slanted feet for those dynamic poses. These little guys are a little tricky to get to stand, but you can make it possible if you have the right space. So just so you can see them all together. This is something I did not expect, but it is a nice addition. Now, one thing about the truck mode, honestly, that was actually one of the things that had slowed me down on wanting the figure, because they didn't quite perfect it. The truck was acceptable. It was a little bit of an interesting design, futuristic. I would have liked, of course, having only 4 wheels versus the 6. That's still not a huge biggie. The thing that always threw me off, though, was the proportions of the trailer and how short it was. However, I can get over it. I'm probably never going to put it in vehicle mode again because of what it does in the end, but it's still interesting. But we can go ahead and turn it, show you guys the front of the truck. It's actually kind of different looking in there without the engine mode, which is something I prefer. There's the back without the trailer. And then we have the trailer, you can see all the way around. And then underneath, you can see the parts of the bot. With that said, I do think the truck mode is improved by placing the engine in there, because that fills that indentation and it sort of just adds the whole look. And just add the hitch on like so. I just want to do a quick comparison, the original Power Master, so you can just get an idea of how they scale together and how they look. But of course, yes, the designs are very unique. They're very futuristic semi-truck. I think they do fit in a collection well enough together. Of course, the only minor gripe is making the taller trailer. Not a whole lot you can do. Otherwise, it would impact the design of the final combination. And here we have the God Bomber mode, which is much heavier than I expected. I mean, this is a compact piece compared to the rest of it, but it is pretty substantial in its weight and mass. So you can see it all the way around. It's supposed to be a vehicle itself, but also can be towed by the other mode, which there should be a hitch in here. But yeah, it's pretty neat. I'll say this. I think the color scheme of things like this are really going to ring true to those that are fans of Diaclone. They may be a little garish and retro for the people who are not familiar with the series. It may be interesting to them, but I do think this is definitely geared towards a specific audience as far as the colors go and all the style. And of course, we want to bring out the original just so you can see a comparison. This is actually not the original. This is the anniversary edition from Toys R Us. However, it is the same mold of the Japanese version, which gives you an idea of how it's supposed to look. But that said, I think they really nailed it. They probably actually made it even better as far as how it's supposed to be, because it was really just a small parts former. And there's a lot more visually going on with the new one. And here we have the Core Robot mode, which actually, this is a really great color scheme. I like these black legs. I like the yellow tampos that are put on there. It's kind of got that vibe that you might see in some of the Gundam decals that are done from the third party. We've got yellow eyes, just like the toy Optimus Prime, yellow chest. What I really appreciate is the fact that there's chrome on this figure, not just silver paint, but actual chrome. There are some interestingly strange things about this figure. So one thing to note, unlike the original Power Master, you don't have to have the engine in the back. Now you can insert it in the back and keep it back there for that mode, but it's not required. So you can actually keep that figure on display with this one. Articulation's pretty good. Really just run-of-the-mill ankle, knees. We have a double hinge elbow, which is actually kind of an interesting elbow. Shoulders. We do have an ankle tilt, but what I find kind of strange is how this panel goes with it. It's interesting, but it is just a little bit different. I think it kind of breaks up the form, but it's not the end of the world. One thing that does really stand out, though, is the fact that we have this sort of hollowish area on the grill. I do think a single panel on each side that maybe folded out or something somewhere might have been a nice way to fill it. It's not the end of the world, but it does, when you're looking at it closely, stand out. But when it's on display, you really don't notice it so much. But that said, it is still a cool looking Optimus Prime. Transformation is simple enough, just complicated enough to be fun, but simple enough to where you don't necessarily need a lot of guidance to do it. I do appreciate that in this mode, he actually can still wield the weapons. And another note about this figure, inside the leg of the Corebot mode is a number. This is a numbered edition of 600 figures, and mine personally is number 70. So for comparison, we have an original G1 Power Master Optimus Prime, so you can see how that fares. And here you can see him with MP-10, which as standalone bots, MP-10 of course has a lot more engineering going on to make him a more cohesive bot, but this is just a core mode bot. So he's really in vein with the G1 Power Master Optimus Prime, where it is very different than the original bot, with some gives and takes as far as design goes. And then lastly, since it shared the Ultra Magnus core design, let's go ahead and just show how these two look together. And now we have Magna Bomber transformed, aka God Bomber, aka Apex, and this is much more than I expected. So from the pictures, he was okay looking. He actually looks much better in person, and I really actually have grown to like the head after seeing the transformation, because it's two halves, front and back, they'll actually slide together, and I thought that was really a cool idea. There was a few trickery things, and some of the plastic on this, the thinner panels feel like they could be a little bit more fragile, but I think if you're careful and hold things at the hinge as you bend them, you'll be okay. I didn't have any issues as I did mine, but I think it's something to be aware of. I found the plastic to be pretty high quality overall, but sometimes you still have to be careful considering this is not a cheap toy, and then who knows how much you'll be on the aftermarket. Now, one thing I was not expecting is that I actually have two missiles here, red and silver, and they go in here, and there is a spring-loaded mechanism, so you can fire it out. I'm not used to seeing that in toys anymore, and even though this is a high-end toy, it's really cool to see that in there. That's usually something that's kind of gets left out because it's a play gimmick of ancient times. Now, we do have the two swords. They hold on here with these two pegs. I'm going to take them off, though, because I'm probably going to knock them off during posing this guy. But we have some rotation here. We have some pretty hefty joints here. The skirts move. Pretty good double knee bend. The ankles extend, which was a little tricky to figure out. I found there was a button on the side here, and so you can get some ankle tilt. The feet, they have some movement in their transformation, but it's nothing to write home about. But I think you can still get some pretty good poses between all the movement in the legs. Got movement in the shoulders. Up here, we've got this neat little skirt that covers the joint. Rotation of the bicep. Elbow moves like so. Posable fingers, individual. These are some nice looking hands. Moving at the wrist, got a big old ball joint there. Then even, there's not a lot of head articulation, but it's impressive the fact that it has it considering how it transforms. But yeah, let's see what it looks like from behind. Now, this does have a bit more substantial weight than the Jinrai figure, but it is still got a bit, it's still pretty light as far as plastic goes. I think the waist joint could be a little bit firmer. It's not holding too well, so I'm going to use the hip joints to move that down to help keep that stabilized. Honestly, this is, for me personally, the whole set is not hugely photogenic, but in person is a much better experience. And here he is with the original Apex Bomber, aka God Bomber. And you can see they really captured the visual cues. Everything from the little pegs here to this area here, the vents, the cannon, the wings, the wing on the arms, the form of the legs, the little shapes there. They really captured a lot of the essence, and I think they did a great job pulling from the past and then putting their own spin on it. And here's how he scales with MP Ultra Magnus, and with MP-10, and with the Delta BASER core robot. And then lastly, you can see the original Apex was bigger than Jinrai or Power Master Optimus Prime. And here we have base mode, and there's not a whole lot to say about it. It's just a nice homage to the original figure that allows you to sort of have it as a base and display the other figures around it. Now, we do have these additional weapons here that can be swapped out, and actually, there's a couple different configurations by putting stuff up here or down here. The main rifles come apart, and part of it goes here, and the other one turns into that. So this is just a neat mode to have. And just to show everyone off as a group together with the base mode. This is a really cool display piece as well, just in this configuration. And here's how it compares to the G1 base mode. As you can see, the G1 base mode is still probably one of the best, but it makes its sacrifices in other places, like by being a giant brick. Now this is the part I'm really here for. This is the mode I was most sold on because this is such an awesome color scheme and this looks really good as a combined mode. That said, if this is not your first Power Baser, you know what you're getting into. But if you're like me and this is your first one, this is not the easiest toy to put together. There is some engineering that's a little questionable. It doesn't support some of the visual design choices that were made as well. However, overall, I still like the way this looks, but you just need to know that when you're trying to put this together, especially into these combined modes, there is a bit more work involved. Some things I would have liked to see change for sure is a locking mechanism that stops this from sliding down more than it needs to, and maybe even a movable piston down here that could link to the feet. One note about my copy, it seems like for the most part, the majority of my ratchets are good, but the ones in this ankle and the heels really don't have any click to them. So that's something I might have to reach out and contact them for, or take it apart myself and see if I can rectify, just because they're not very strong ratchets, and this is a big guy and he's only going to get bigger. But that said, there is so much visually that looks great. I mean, I love this head. This is such a great color scheme. Might have wanted the second ones to also be silver, of these little circle pieces down here, but it still looks pretty good as is. Great painting. Now, one note about the eyes is they protrude a little bit rather than recess, which is an actual interesting design choice. And this has a LED feature where you can swap the eyes out for the opaque ones or have clear ones that light up. Since I don't like to leave batteries in my toys, I will opt for the solid ones. And of course, we have shoulders that can move out pretty far. Good rotation. Those are nice and quickly. Double jointed elbow. These are some gorgeous hands on here. Nice posable fingers. I do think it would have been interesting to have these be dual tone, like the hands on some of the other versions, like maybe different color fingers than this part of the hand, but it still looks good as is. We have some movement on the skirts here. We do have some waist rotation. You just have to move the skirts to make it happen. There is these monster ratchets on the hips, which of course have rotation here. Then we have the big old double jointed knee. There is some multiple joints here in the ankle, but like I said, this one in the heel seems kind of soft. It actually only clicks the very last portion. This one has a little bit of click to it, but this one here, you don't hear anything. So I don't know if that means that the plastic inside is loose and could be tightened, or if it just is not holding up. That I don't know. From the back, it looks pretty good. I know that the feet being back here and higher above the head was a little bit controversial, and I'm sure there's something that could have been done about it. But seeing this toy is a mishmash of older and newer engineering. And while visually, for the most part, it looks really good, you have to just accept that there might be some things in here technology-wise that could be better engineered, as far as like the combination modes and maybe the way some things tab in or fold together. It seems to rely more on an older way of thinking of third-party toys that, we've had several years ago. There are some new ideas sprinkled here and there, but for the most part, you just have to accept there are some limitations in the design, and there is some finagling you'll have to do when you want to change it to its different modes. That said, like I've said many times before, I still love this mode. I still think it looks great, and honestly, there's a good chance this is probably the mode it's going to stay in for as long as I have it. So here's how he scales with MP10 now, and this really does fit in well together on the shelf. And now you can see how he towers over Ultra Magnus. And here he is with the Magna Bomber. Magna Bomber still being a beefier bot as far as mass goes. And since I have the combined mode out, I just want to show him with TFC's Rolling Thunder Optimus Prime, which honestly is my favorite combining Optimus Prime I've gotten this year. And lastly, even though this is of a different scale and a different figure, I did want to show him next to what I still consider to be one of the best Power Master Optimus Prime third-party figures. I think if there was a way to combine these two as far as engineering and materials and aesthetic, we would have the ultimate version. And of course, we need to look at it next to the original Power Master Optimus Prime, and you can see where details and hues come from. The triangles in the knees, the vents below that, the large skirt area, and all the other accents that are in the arms and weapons and all that stuff. They really borrowed quite well from this. And they did take on a very big challenge. It is a huge challenge to try to take those original feet from Power Master Optimus Prime and make it into something dynamic. And I think they did, for the most part, a good job of that. Now we're starting to combine everything into the full God mode, and I wanted to do a few things as we get there. I like doing my own combinations and come up with my own kind of schemes when I put together my toys, and I thought I would just show you guys as we go along a few different things. So this is with just the feet upgrade and forearm upgrade, and I actually think that's pretty cool looking. I think it's a nice add-on. It really adds some power to the figure, and even though there's very little red other than the fist, I still think it's a pretty cool look. Now here's that same look with the wings added. I actually could be pretty happy with this configuration right here. Now here's that same configuration with just the skirts added. Now before going any further, I wanted to show you guys what it looks like inside the cockpit here for the Headmaster Juniors. There are some really neat effects back here, but we have each figure and we have their helmet stored on the background, and it just snaps closed like so. You can see them through the windows. Now let's see how he looks on Power Baser. And now we have the chest armor on, and he's really getting heavy as far as the joints go. I'm having to sort of adjust things as we go, but it's looking really beefy. So I'm going to do one more mode before we add the new head. Essentially, all the gear that would normally go on the final conversion, but keeping the prime head. Not everyone may want the Ultra Magnus head, so they might want to see what it looks like this. So here's your shot to see if you prefer it this way or the way we're going to swap it. Now, what I could say about what's going on so far is that all this weight is putting a whole lot of stress on these joints. It's getting a little trickier and more of a balancing act to keep him stable as we keep adding more and more on him. What I do find very cool is that the sword does extend. It goes from this to this behemoth we have here. It stores on the back, and the weapons, the rifles can actually store here, but it adds so much weight here, it actually doesn't hold up very well. It's very easy to push that down. So I wouldn't bother putting the rifles there. Now, me personally, I always prefer the double cannons over these missiles. However, to each their own. There's also a silver version of the missile you can switch on there, which is this. Easy enough to do. So now I'm going to go put the final mode together. So let's look at the heads compared to each other. I will always probably prefer a prime head, but they both look really good. Now, to remove this, you just have to separate it. There's no screws. You just work it slowly. I actually have a part separator for model kits, and I just slowly worked around each side to evenly keep the pegs so there's no stress for strapping them. And that's where you put the battery. That's where you, and the switch for turning on and on is back here. And then for this head, it shows in the instructions just to pop it on, but just to avoid any stress, I took a very specialized screwdriver and popped out the bolts just a little bit so I can make it a little bit larger so I don't have to fight it and put any stress on it. So let's go ahead and get installed and see our final mode. Now I have the head on there, and as usual, let's show you guys the options. This is with generalized chest, fully exposed. And here we have the final reveal of the total combined figure. I know it's been quite the journey. There's been a lot of pieces to go through and a lot to talk about, but here we finally have it in all its glory. So this guy is, of course, a behemoth. You can see how we've gone from the tiny Power Master to this giant. And it's a really cool looking figure. I like this head on it, I believe, better for this mode because we have all these blues and reds and silvers and blacks just sort of working together. And that red really helps the head stand out in this whole mess of parts. And of course, I've had some nitpicks along the way, but I think even with all that, I'm pretty happy with this purchase just because there's so much to do and so much to enjoy. But for me, I will probably only ever use it in this mode and the Power Master mode. I doubt I will take it down any further than that just because it's such a hassle to reassemble. And it's not like I like to display things in alt modes anyway. But of course, we retain much the same articulation. The only challenge now is you have to find a balance. I find my ratchets don't always hold every position, so I have to kind of adjust the legs in ways to make it the most secure and not a shelf diver. I think it will hold up well on its own, but you just want to make sure you have it in a way where it's not going to topple over. So this is going to go in a glass case. But before we go, let's go ahead and compare it to a few other figures. And here we have MP-10. And we also have Masterpiece Ultra Magnus, which just has nothing on this guy as far as mass goes. And from this angle, we can see the head sculpt's a little bit better. And here's a previous review, which I already thought was a behemoth, but he's still pretty small compared to Delta Baser. And lastly, let's combine him to the G1 mode himself, just to see how all the parts tie together and call back to the original. Much of the same parts of God Bomber are used in the same ways on Delta BASER. And I must say, it is going to really have some presence on my shelf. But my understanding is, Fans Hobby and the Chosen Prime will have these up online, I think around the 25th, but check their websites online to see what times they're going to list them. I don't think there's going to be many in supply. There's a total of 600, and I'm pretty happy I got mine. With all that said, let us know in the comments below if this is worthy of your collection. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you all next time.